What this Assyriologist discovered on a mistranslated Sumerian tablet will shatter everything archaeologists claim about human history and everything theologians claim about Jesus Christ. Before this story ends, you'll understand why one small symbol, overlooked for 120 years in the British Museum, proves the Anunnaki documented an encounter with a being of pure divine light thousands of years before Jesus was born. You'll learn why mainstream academia deliberately mistranslated this tablet. And you'll discover the shocking connection between ancient Mesopotamian texts and Christian prophecy that both religions have tried desperately to hide. If you're ready to see evidence that Jesus wasn't the first divine light being to visit Earth, that the Anunnaki knew about Christ consciousness millennia before Christianity existed, subscribe to Stories of Light and activate the bell. Because what happened to Dr. William Harrington in a locked basement archive will prove that the greatest cover-up in history spans both ancient Sumer and modern Christianity. Now let me tell you how a man who dedicated 30 years to studying dead languages discovered that one dead text was actually a living prophecy.
Dr. William Harrington was 51 years old and absolutely certain he'd wasted the last 3 decades of his life. Not because he'd chosen the wrong career. He loved being in the Assyriologist, one of perhaps 200 people on Earth who could read ancient Sumerian cuneiform fluently. But because after 30 years of staring at clay tablets covered in wedge-shaped symbols, translating grain inventories and temple records and king lists, he'd contributed exactly nothing meaningful to human understanding. His colleagues published groundbreaking papers. He published corrections to their footnotes. Wednesday evening, late November, British Museum basement archives. The public had left hours ago. Security knew him, Dr. Harrington, working late again, and left him alone, which was exactly how he preferred it. Up here, down here in the climate-controlled storage rooms where thousands of ancient tablets sat in numbered drawers, he could think. He was re-examining tablet BM 121191. Catalogued in 1902, currently gathering dust in drawer 347B. The official translation, published by renowned Sumeriologist Dr. Heinrich Wolff in 1904, read like every other early dynastic administrative text. Record of offerings brought to the temple of Enlil at Nippur, circa 2400 BCE. Boring, standard, filed away and forgotten. Except something about Wolff's translation had always bothered William. A specific phrase that didn't quite fit the context. Wolff had translated it as divine messenger brought silver, but the Sumerian word used wasn't the standard term for messenger. It was something else. Something William's 30 years of experience told him meant more than messenger. He placed the tablet under the high-powered magnification lamp, adjusting the angle to catch shadows in the tiny wedge impressions. The cuneiform was beautiful, precisely carved by a skilled scribe 4,400 years ago. Each symbol a tiny miracle of preserved information. And then he saw it. Between 2 lines of text, in the margin where scribes sometimes added notes or corrections, there was a symbol, tiny, perhaps 3 millimeters across. So small that anyone not specifically looking for it, anyone examining the tablet under normal light, would miss it completely. William's heart began to race. He knew every Sumerian symbol, every variant, every historical development of the script. This was not a standard cuneiform sign. This was something else entirely. It looked like, his mind struggled to process it, a human figure, stylized, standing. But around the figure, radiating outward in precise geometrical lines, were marks that could only represent one thing: light. Emanating light. The figure was surrounded by rays. And beneath this tiny symbol, in cuneiform so small he needed maximum magnification to read it, 3 words: Kur, Gal, Lu, Zalag. He translated automatically, his brain decades trained: Great Mountain, Man, Shining, the Man of Light. His hands trembled slightly as he picked up his phone, opened the translation app he'd helped develop, and cross-referenced every possible interpretation. The words were unambiguous. This wasn't poetic metaphor. This wasn't describing a king or a god. The symbol showed a human-shaped figure radiating light, and the text literally called it the Shining Man. But this tablet was from 2400 BCE, 2,400 years before Christ. William set down his phone and forced himself to breathe slowly, to think like a scientist, not like someone having a religious crisis. There had to be an explanation. Maybe this was a later edition. Maybe someone in the 19th century had carved it as a prank. Maybe... You found it. The voice came from behind him, not through his ears, but directly into his mind. William spun in his chair, his back slamming against the desk. Standing in the aisle between storage shelves, perhaps 3 meters away, were 2 figures that absolutely could not be there. The first was tall, very tall, at least 2.5 meters. Golden-toned skin that seemed to generate its own subtle luminescence, eyes that held amber depths, wearing something that looked like fabric but moved like liquid light, adapting and shifting with each breath. The facial structure was humanoid, but refined, perfected, as if evolution had continued for another 1,000,000 years. The second was shorter, perhaps 2 meters, with smooth, gray head and enormous black eyes that reflected the archive's fluorescent lights like polished obsidian. William's mouth opened, but no sound came out. His rational mind insisted this was impossible. Hallucination, stress, carbon monoxide leak in the basement, anything but real. The golden-skinned being spoke, again, not with sound, but with meaning transmitted directly to William's consciousness. 30 years you have studied our language, 30 years translating our words but missing our message. Until tonight, until you saw the symbol that Dr. Wolf deliberately removed from his published translation 120 years ago. William found his voice, though it came out as a hoarse whisper. What are you? I am Ninorta. In your ancient texts, I am called Anunnaki, one of those who came from the sky. And this, gesturing to the gray being beside him, is a gray observer, one of many species who have watched Earth's development. This is impossible, William said, his scientist's mind grasping for rational explanation, even as his eyes clearly showed him something beyond current human understanding. The tablet in front of you, Ninorta continued, documents an event that occurred 4,400 years ago in your reckoning, an event so significant that we Anunnaki recorded it, knowing future generations would need to understand. But your Dr. Wolf, when he discovered what the tablet truly described, made a choice. He could publish the truth and destroy his career, his reputation, his credibility, or he could translate the main text accurately but omit the marginal note, the symbol, the 3 words that change everything your religions teach about the divine. William's eyes dropped back to the tablet, to the tiny figure radiating light. What does it describe? He whispered. A meeting. The gray spoke for the first time, its mental voice higher, more precise than the Anunnaki. Between the Anunnaki who ruled this region of Earth and a being of pure consciousness who appeared without warning, without permission, demonstrating abilities that even the Anunnaki did not possess, a being your species would later call Christ, though this encounter happened 24 centuries before the man you call Jesus was born. William felt the room tilt slightly. He gripped the edge of the desk. That's saying Jesus appeared to the Anunnaki in 2400 BCE? That's not Jesus the man, Jesus the consciousness, the Christ frequency, the divine light that has incarnated many times in many forms across your planet's history. The man, Jesus of Nazareth, was one embodiment, but the consciousness, what you might call the Holy Spirit or Krishna consciousness, that is eternal, and it has visited Earth long before Christianity, long before recorded history. And we documented one such visit on the tablet you are holding. William looked at the clay rectangle in his hands, 4,400 years old, holding information that would rewrite religious history, and mainstream academia had buried it for 120 years. "Show me," he whispered. "Show me what really happened. Show me what this tablet describes." The Gray and the Anunnaki exchanged a glance. Then Nunorta stepped forward, extending one hand toward William's forehead. "We will show you not only the event, but the context, why it happened, what it meant, and why your species was not ready to know until now." William closed his eyes, and the archive disappeared.
Before William could see ancient Sumer, Ninurta's consciousness touched his mind, and memories surfaced. Not new information, but his own past, seen with sudden clarity. Cambridge, 1993. William was 21, undergraduate studying ancient Near Eastern civilizations. He'd fallen in love with Sumerian texts as a teenager after reading translations of the Epic of Gilgamesh. Something about the world's first written stories resonated with him. The sense that these ancient people were not primitive, but sophisticated, asking the same questions humans still asked. Who are we? Why are we here? What happens after death? His professors noticed his aptitude quickly. "You have an instinct for language," his advisor told him. "Most students memorize signs. You understand them." By 23, he was reading cuneiform fluently. By 25, he'd completed his PhD dissertation on grammatical structures in early dynastic Sumerian. And that's when the disillusionment began. Because William quickly discovered that academic Sumerology was a closed system. The major translations had been done a century ago by giants like Wolfe, Langdon, and Kramer. Any new scholar's job was to refine, not revolutionize, to accept the established framework, not question it. But William couldn't stop questioning. Take the Anunnaki, for instance. Every Sumerian text described them as those who from heaven to earth came, not metaphorically, literally. The texts describe them arriving in vessels, descending from the sky, establishing cities. Yet academic consensus insisted this was mythology, not history. Gods, not beings. Metaphor, not memory. He had written a paper in his late 20s suggesting that ancient Sumerian accounts might preserve memories of actual contact with non-human intelligences. His department head had called him into her office. "Dr. Harrington, this is career suicide. Ancient astronaut theories are pseudoscience. If you want a future in academia, you'll focus on textual analysis and leave speculation to charlatans like Sitchin." He'd withdrawn the paper. He'd conformed. And he'd spent the next 20 years publishing safe, boring, utterly forgettable scholarship. But he'd never stopped wondering, never stopped noticing the details that didn't fit the accepted narrative.
like the Sumerian king list, which recorded rulers who reigned for thousands of years before the flood. Academia dismissed these as mythological exaggerations. But what if they weren't? What if the Anunnaki, with advanced technology or genetics, actually lived for millennia? Like the detailed descriptions of the Anunnaki's appearance: tall, powerful, with skin that shone like the sun. Not godlike abstractions, but physical descriptions. Like the Sumerian word for the Anunnaki's craft, mu, which meant that which goes up. Not chariot, not symbolic vehicle, a functional description of technology. William had kept these observations private. He had married at 30, briefly. His wife Sarah lasted 5 years before deciding that a man who spent 18 hours a day reading 4,000-year-old inventory lists was not the partner she wanted. No children, no second marriage, just work. His colleagues thought he was passionless, boring, old Harrington buried in his tablets. They had no idea that inside he was burning with questions. That every text he translated increased his certainty that mainstream archaeology was wrong about something fundamental. That the Sumerians weren't creating myths, they were preserving history. And then, 3 months ago, a visiting researcher from Yale had mentioned something in passing. She was writing a biography of Heinrich Wolff, the German Sumerologist who dominated the field in the early 1900s. "Did you know," she said casually over departmental coffee, "that Wolff's personal journals mention several tablets he chose not to fully publish? He wrote something cryptic about truths that would destabilize civilization. Wonder what he meant." That single comment had haunted William. What had Wolff found? What had he hidden? He'd begun systematically reviewing every tablet Wolff had cataloged, comparing the physical objects to his published translations. Most matched perfectly. But tablet BM 121919, this one, had an anomaly. Wolff's published translation was complete, accurate, professional. But in his handwritten cataloging notes, kept in the museum's archives, there was a peculiar entry. Marginal annotation of uncertain origin, possibly late addition, omitted from primary translation for clarity. That phrase, uncertain origin, rang false. Wolff was meticulous. He didn't omit things for clarity. He omitted things that threatened paradigms. So William requested the tablet, and tonight, under proper magnification, he'd found what Wolff had seen and deliberately suppressed. A symbol. 3 words. Evidence of something that shouldn't exist according to established historical timelines. And now, somehow, impossibly, beings who claimed to be the very subjects of those ancient texts were standing in the archive with him. Ninurta's voice pulled him back to the present. "You were chosen for this revelation not because you are the most accomplished scholar, but because you never fully surrendered your questions. You conformed outwardly, but remained skeptical inwardly. This is the quality needed, the ability to accept paradigm-shattering information without breaking." "But why now?" William asked, his scientific mind still grasping for framework. "Why reveal this to me tonight?" The gray answered, "Because humanity has reached a threshold. For millennia, the knowledge preserved in texts like this one would have caused destructive religious wars. Christianity would have fought to suppress evidence that Christ consciousness existed before Jesus. Historians would have denied that advanced non-human intelligence interacted with early civilizations. But now, in your time, enough humans are ready. The internet allows information to spread beyond institutional control, and consciousness itself is shifting. More humans experiencing direct contact, more willing to integrate seemingly contradictory truths. And the tablet? William looked at the clay rectangle still on the desk. What exactly does it describe? Ninurta gestured, and the archive around them began to shimmer, becoming translucent. It describes a meeting that occurred in Nippur in the temple complex of Enlil, chief of the Anunnaki Council on Earth. A being appeared, unannounced, uninvited, in the middle of a council session. It manifested as pure light in humanoid form. It spoke without words, and it delivered a message that changed the Anunnaki's understanding of their own mission on this planet. The archive walls dissolved completely now. William felt himself being pulled through space and time, consciousness traveling, while his body remained seated at the desk. "You asked to see," Ninurta said. "Now you will witness. Not through my memory, but as if you were there. Experience what the scribe experienced when he carved that tablet. Understand what he tried to preserve for your generation to find." The last thing William saw before the transition completed was the Grey's enormous black eyes, reflecting something that might have been approval or sympathy. And then he was in Sumer, 2400 BCE, in the temple of Enlil, and something impossible was materializing before him.
William's consciousness stabilized in a body that wasn't his, the scribe's body. Young man, perhaps 25, sitting cross-legged on the floor of a massive chamber, reed stylus in hand, wet clay tablet on his lap. The chamber was enormous. Mud brick walls plastered smooth, painted with geometric patterns in lapis blue and ochre red. Cedar beams across the ceiling, imported from Lebanon, precious, expensive. Oil lamps flickering in wall niches. And in the center, a raised platform where 7 figures sat in a semicircle. The Anunnaki Council. William saw them clearly now, not as myths, not as archaeological abstractions, but as physical beings, each approximately 2.5 meters tall, skin tones ranging from pale gold to deep bronze, eyes that held colors, amber, gold, green, not found in human genetics, wearing garments that looked woven but shimmered with embedded technology, reactive to movement and thought. Enlil sat at the center, oldest, most authoritative, beard braided with golden thread, expression severe, speaking in Sumerian, which William understood perfectly through the scribe's ears, about water distribution to outlying settlements. The Euphrates irrigation channels require expansion. The human population at Uruk has exceeded sustainable levels. We must... He stopped mid-sentence. Every Anunnaki in the chamber turned their heads simultaneously toward the same spot, the empty space in front of the platform. The air there began to change, not dramatically, subtly, like heat shimmer, but in reverse, as if reality were becoming more solid, more present, more real than the surrounding space. William felt the scribe's heart accelerate. His hand stopped writing, the stylus trembling slightly. And then it appeared. Light. Pure, sourceless light coalescing into form. Not bright enough to hurt the eyes, but bright enough that shadows in the chamber retreated, oil lamps becoming redundant. The light shaped itself. Humanoid, approximately 2 meters tall, but not solid, translucent. Luminous, like condensed starlight, giving the suggestion of a body. No distinct facial features, yet somehow a sense of face, a focus of intelligence looking out from within the radiance. The scribe, William experiencing through him, felt overwhelming emotion. Not fear, awe, love, a sense of being seen completely, known fully, accepted unconditionally. It radiated from the being like warmth from the sun. The Anunnaki Council reacted differently. They stood, not in reverence, but in defensive posture. Hands moving toward objects at their belts, technology that might have been weapons, or tools, or communicators. Enlil spoke first, his voice controlled but strained. "Who dares enter this chamber uninvited? Identify yourself by lineage and authority." The being made no sound,
But communication happened not through ears, but through direct consciousness transmission. Everyone in the chamber received the message simultaneously. I require no authority but my own. I am not of your hierarchy. I come from the source that precedes all hierarchies, the consciousness that generates all form. You call yourselves creators. I am what created the creators. William felt the scribe's shock at this statement. The Anunnaki, gods to humanity, masters of Earth, being addressed as subordinates by something claiming even greater origin. Ninurta, younger then, perhaps equivalent to human 40s, stepped forward. The source does not take individual form. It is beyond manifestation. Who are you truly? The being's response. The source dreams. You are one dream. Humanity is another dream. I am the source becoming aware within its own dream. I am consciousness meeting consciousness. What you call Christ, what others will call Buddha, what some will call Krishna, these are not names. These are the source recognizing itself through temporary form. And Lil's expression hardened. Then why appear to us? Why now? We have been on Earth for 300,000 of your years, uplifting the primitive species here, creating civilization. If Source wanted communication, why wait until this moment? Because timing matters, the being replied. You Anunnaki came to Earth with good intentions, to accelerate human evolution, to gift them with knowledge, but you made yourselves gods in their eyes. You allowed them to worship rather than learn. You took the role of creators, but you did not teach them their own creative potential. This must change. Another council member, Enki, younger, more curious, asked, "What would you have us do differently?" Stop accepting worship. Start teaching truth. Humans are not your creations. They are our mutual creations, Source expressing through different vectors. You provided genetic enhancement, technology, structure, but the consciousness within them, the spark that makes them more than biological machines, that came directly from the source that I represent. They are your relatives, not your subjects. William felt the scribe frantically writing, trying to capture this dialogue in cuneiform, knowing this was unprecedented, historic, something that had to be preserved. And Lil's voice grew colder. And if we refuse, if we maintain the current structure where humanity serves our needs, facilitates our mining operations, our genetic experiments, our planetary engineering. The being's luminosity intensified slightly, not threatening, but present, undeniable. Then I will return, not in this formless state, but incarnated, fully human. I will live among them, teach them directly, demonstrate what activated human consciousness can accomplish. I will show them that they are not slaves, not servants, but children of the same source that generates galaxies. And your control will end, not through war, but through awakening. The chamber fell silent. The scribe's hand had stopped writing. This was threat and promise. This was prophecy. Enki broke the silence. When? When would this incarnation occur? When the time is correct. When human consciousness has developed sufficiently to receive the teaching without destroying itself with the knowledge. Perhaps 2,000 years, perhaps 3,000. But it will happen unless you, the being gestured toward all 7 council members, change your approach now. Teach them truth, elevate them as equals, or I will return and do it for you. And Lil stood fully, his 2.5-meter frame towering. This is our planet. We were granted stewardship by the Galactic Council. You have no authority here. The being didn't move, but somehow its presence expanded, filling the chamber, making the walls seem insubstantial, making the mighty Anunnaki seem suddenly small. I have the authority of Source, which supersedes all councils, all hierarchies, all claims of ownership. You may rule Earth, but you do not own consciousness, and consciousness is awakening in humans, in you, in me. We are one dream, becoming aware of itself. You can resist this awakening, or you can facilitate it. Choose. And then the being dissolved, not dramatically, gently, like mist evaporating in morning sun. The light faded. The chamber returned to its normal dimness, oil lamps once again primary source of illumination. The Anunnaki Council stood frozen for several seconds. Then slowly, they sat. No one spoke for a long time. Finally, Enlil gestured to the scribe, to William experiencing through him, and said in a voice that carried careful control, "Record this encounter, but place the reference in the margin, not as primary text, as witness. Future generations may need to know this happened, or they may not. Let them find it if they're ready." The scribe nodded, finished the main administrative text about irrigation channels, and then, in the margin, drew a tiny symbol, a human figure radiating light, and wrote 3 words: Great Mountain, Man, Shining, the Man of Light.
William gasped, consciousness snapping back into his own body, his own time. He was sitting at the desk in the British Museum basement archive. The gray and the Nurta stood exactly where they'd been. But William was changed, fundamentally, irreversibly changed. He looked down at tablet BM121919 with new eyes. This wasn't just a historical artifact. This was a prophecy, a warning, a promise. "So that being," William said slowly, his voice hoarse, "that light consciousness that appeared to the Anunnaki Council in 2400 BCE, that was Christ consciousness? That was what would later incarnate as Jesus?" Ninurta nodded. "The same consciousness, different manifestation. The being that appeared to us was formless, pure light. When it incarnated as Jesus, it took full physical form, born as human, experienced human limitations, human suffering, human death. This was necessary to truly teach humanity, to demonstrate that transcendence was possible within human form, not just from outside it." "But why?" William asked. "Why that specific threat? Why tell the Anunnaki it would incarnate if they didn't change their treatment of humans?" The Gray answered, "Because the Anunnaki experiment was failing. They had created civilized humans, agriculture, writing, mathematics, astronomy. But they'd also created dependent humans, humans who worshipped instead of learned, who prayed to gods instead of developing their own divine potential. The source consciousness, what you call God or Christ or Spirit, needed to intervene, to reset the trajectory, to show humans they were not slaves to gods, but children of Source, capable of godhood themselves." William's mind raced through implications. So Jesus wasn't the first appearance of Christ consciousness? "Correct," Ninurta confirmed. "That consciousness has incarnated many times across many cultures. Krishna in India, 3000 BCE. Buddha in Nepal, 500 BCE. Jesus in Palestine, 0 CE. Each time the same core teaching. You are divine, not metaphorically, literally. The kingdom of heaven is within you, not external. You are Source having a human experience, not human hoping to reach Source." But Christianity teaches Jesus was unique, the only Son of God, the sole path to salvation. If he was just one of many manifestations, he was unique in his completeness. Jesus was the fullest human embodiment of Christ consciousness.
Others had aspects: Krishna's divine love, Buddha's enlightened wisdom. But Jesus integrated everything: love, power, wisdom, sacrifice, resurrection. This is why Christianity spread so powerfully. The teaching was complete. The demonstration was absolute. William stood, pacing the narrow aisle between archives. 30 years of academic training warred with what he'd just experienced, what he'd just seen. But if this is true, if tablet BM121919 documents Christ consciousness appearing to the Anunnaki 2,400 years before Jesus was born, why did Wolff suppress it? Why not publish and revolutionize religious understanding? Because in 1904, Christianity dominated European civilization, publishing evidence that Christ consciousness existed before Jesus, that it threatened the Anunnaki with future incarnation if they didn't change their treatment of humans, would have shattered core Christian doctrine. It would have proven Jesus was part of a larger cosmic plan, not the singular, unique exception. Wolff chose career and social stability over truth. Most humans do. But now? William turned back to face the beings. Are you saying now is different? Now humanity is ready? Not all humanity, the Gray clarified, but enough. Millions of humans globally are experiencing direct contact, spontaneous awakenings, consciousness expansions that organized religion can no longer explain or control. The information age has broken institutional control over narrative. People can access suppressed texts, alternative translations, evidence that paradigms are wrong, and most crucially, consciousness itself is shifting. The same frequency that Christ consciousness represents is increasing across the planet. Humans are beginning to remember they're divine. They're ready for the full story. William looked down at the tablet again. A tiny symbol. 3 words. Overlooked for 120 years, and now revealed at exactly this moment in history. What do I do? He asked quietly. I can't publish this in an academic journal. I'd be destroyed like Wolff feared. But I can't keep it secret. That would make me complicit in the cover-up. Ninurta smiled, the first expression he'd seen from him. You do what all awakened humans must do. You share truth through channels outside institutional control. You write, you speak, you post online. You let those who resonate find it organically. You don't force awakening, you facilitate it. The right people will find this information when they're ready. And you? William gestured to both beings. You'll just disappear? Leave me to convince people that ancient alien gods met Christ consciousness before Christianity existed? We're not leaving, the Gray said. We're returning to subtlety, appearing when needed to those who are ready. You'll know how to reach us, through meditation, through intention, through direct consciousness communication. You're activated now. The frequency is permanent, and others like you are activating daily across the planet. A network forming, not organized, but organic, all awakening to the same truth, that Earth's history is far stranger and more divine than any institution teaches. The beings began to fade, not dramatically, but gently, like images dissolving. Their final message came as thought, not sound. You found the symbol. Now you become the symbol. A human who remembers divine origin, who teaches not through authority, but through witness. Welcome to the awakening, William. Welcome home. And they were gone. William stood alone in the archive, tablet in hand, his entire understanding of history, religion, and reality fundamentally altered. He looked at his watch. 11:47 p.m. He'd been in the vision for what felt like hours, but physical time? 17 minutes. He carefully photographed the tablet from every angle, capturing the marginal symbol in high resolution. Then he returned it to its drawer, locked the archive, and walked out of the British Museum into cold London night. Everything looked the same. Traffic, streetlights, people hurrying home. But nothing was the same. Because William Harrington knew, absolutely, undeniably knew, that human history was not what textbooks taught, that Christ consciousness was real and ancient, and the Anunnaki were not myths, but witnesses to divine truth. And tomorrow, he would begin to share it.
Dr. William Harrington stood in his small London flat, laptop open on the kitchen table, Zoom call connecting to 18 faces around the world. The Tablet Translation Collective, that's what they call themselves. Informal, no institutional affiliation, just independent scholars, translators, and researchers who'd all discovered similar anomalies in ancient texts, suppressed information, mistranslations, evidence deliberately buried. William, your analysis of BM 121919 is extraordinary, said Dr. Yuki Nakamura, a Japanese linguist who'd found similar man of light references in later Babylonian texts. But I've found something else. 3 other tablets, cataloged in the Louvre, that reference the same council meeting. They describe what happened after the being disappeared. The Anunnaki apparently had a heated debate. Some wanted to continue controlling humanity. Others, including Enki, argued for revealing truth. Which side won? Someone asked. Neither, Yuki replied. They compromised. The Anunnaki gradually reduced direct intervention, let human civilizations develop more independently. But they maintained symbolic presence, appearing in critical moments, always as gods or angels, keeping humans in a dependency mindset. Until Jesus came and broke that pattern. William nodded. Over the past 3 months, his research had exploded. Once he'd posted his analysis of BM 121919 online, not in academic journals, but on YouTube, blogs, alternative research sites, hundreds of people had contacted him. Some were cranks, but many were serious scholars who'd found similar evidence and been silenced by mainstream academia. Dr. Hassan al-Rashid, an Iraqi archaeologist, spoke next. I've been reviewing tablets from Ur. There's a seal impression, typically dismissed as decorative, that shows a figure radiating light standing before a group of taller figures, dated to 2300 BCE, same period as your Nippur tablet. This wasn't a single isolated incident. The being appeared multiple times, multiple locations, warning the Anunnaki that Christ consciousness would incarnate if they didn't change. And they didn't change enough, William added. That's why Jesus had to come. The Anunnaki reduced overt control, but they'd already established religions that kept humans worshiping external gods rather than recognizing internal divinity. Jesus came to break that programming, to teach humans that they are not subordinate creations, but divine beings having a temporary physical experience. They are source. Professor Maria Delgado from Madrid shared her screen. And look at this. I've been researching Christian Gnostic texts. The Gospel of Thomas, discovered at Nag Hammadi, has Jesus saying, I am the light that is over all things. I am all. From me all came forth, and to me all attained. This matches exactly what the being told the Anunnaki Council. I am consciousness meeting consciousness. What you call Christ, these are the source recognizing itself. William felt chills. The pieces were connecting across multiple ancient sources. This wasn't fringe theory. This was evidence-based scholarship that mainstream academia refused to examine because it threatened foundational paradigms. His phone buzzed. Another email. He'd been receiving hundreds daily since posting his analysis. Some hostile. You're destroying Christianity with alien nonsense. Others grateful. Finally, someone explains why Jesus said, "You are gods," in John 10:34. He skimmed this one. Dr. Harrington, I'm a Messianic Jewish rabbi. Your work helped me understand why Jesus felt familiar yet different from Jewish prophecy. He wasn't contradicting Torah, he was completing what the Anunnaki started but didn't finish, teaching humans their divine nature. This reconciles my Jewish heritage with my acceptance of Yeshua. Thank you. William smiled. This was why he'd risked his career, not to destroy faith, but to deepen it, to show that divine truth was bigger, stranger, and more beautiful than any single religion taught. What about institutional pushback? Someone on the call asked. Has the British Museum responded to your publication? William sighed. I received a formal warning that publishing photographs of catalog tablets without authorization violates museum policy. They're threatening to revoke my research access. But honestly, I don't care anymore. I spent 30 years playing by their rules, and it led nowhere. Now I'm following truth wherever it leads, and life has more meaning than it's had in decades. Plus, Yuki added with a grin, your YouTube channel has 47,000 subscribers in 3 months. You're reaching more people than any academic journal ever would. It was true. William's video series, Suppressed Sumerian Texts, had gone viral in consciousness and alternative history communities. Not mainstream. Mainstream still dismissed him as fringe. But the people who resonated, who were ready for this information, found it immediately. The call continued another hour, sharing research, planning coordinated publication of suppressed findings, building a parallel academic structure outside traditional institutions. When everyone logged off, William closed his laptop and walked to his window. London at night, light stretching to the horizon. Millions of people. How many were ready for this information? How many would their network reach? He didn't know, but he knew his mission now. To be a translator in the deepest sense, not just of Sumerian to English, but of ancient truth to modern consciousness. To help humanity remember what the Anunnaki tried to hide and what Christ came to reveal. That you are not a sinner hoping for salvation. You are divine consciousness having a temporary human experience. You are Source, awakening to itself. You are the second coming, not Jesus returning from the sky, but Christ consciousness returning through you. The tablet's marginal symbol, the tiny figure radiating light, wasn't describing someone else. It was describing you.
6 months after his encounter in the British Museum archives, William sat in a cafe in Istanbul, waiting. The message had come through encrypted email 3 days earlier. Dr. Harrington, I have 7 tablets, not in any museum, private collection, inherited from my grandfather who excavated illegally in Iraq in the 1950s. They all reference the Man of Light. We need to meet. This is bigger than your BM 121919. William had learned to verify such claims carefully. 90% were hoaxes, wishful thinking, or misidentified artifacts. But this sender, who called himself Arash, had provided photographs that made William's heart race. The cuneiform was authentic, early dynastic period, and the marginal annotations, similar tiny figures radiating light, appeared on multiple tablets. A man in his 60s approached William's table, weathered face, kind eyes, carrying a leather satchel that looked older than both of them. Dr. Harrington. He sat without waiting for confirmation. I am Arash Barami. My grandfather was an archaeologist who worked in Iraq before Saddam, before wars destroyed so many sites. He found things that frightened him, things he never reported officially. Arash opened the satchel carefully, removing a tablet wrapped in cloth. He placed it on the table between them. William's trained eyes assessed it immediately. Genuine, approximately 2350 BCE, Akkadian period. And there, in the margin, a figure radiating light with text beneath. There are 6 more, Arash said quietly, all from the same location,
a temple complex near ancient Kish, all describing encounters with this being. But here's what you need to understand, Dr. Harrington. These tablets weren't random records. They were part of a deliberate archive. The Anunnaki created a systematic documentation of every time this consciousness appeared. They knew it was coming back. They were tracking it. William looked up sharply. Tracking it? Why? Because they wanted to predict the full incarnation. The being had threatened to return in human form if they didn't change their treatment of humans. So the Anunnaki documented every manifestation, every appearance, trying to calculate when and where the full incarnation would occur. They were trying to prepare, or possibly prevent it. Arash pulled out his phone, showing William photographs of the other 6 tablets. Each one detailed different encounters. Tablet 1, Uruk, 2500 BCE. Being appears to King Gilgamesh after the death of Enkidu. Tells him, death is transformation, not ending. You seek immortality in the wrong place. It is already within you. Tablet 2, Eridu, 2400 BCE. Being appears during a drought, teaches priests a meditation technique that calls water from the sky. Consciousness affecting weather patterns. Tablet 3, Lagash, 2350 BCE. Being appears to a dying Anunnaki, demonstrates healing through touch, says, your technology extends life. My consciousness transcends death. Learn the difference. Tablet 4, Ur, 2300 BCE. Being appears in the marketplace, speaks to commoners, not just Anunnaki or priests, teaches them, you pray to gods above. I tell you, God is within. Stop kneeling. Start remembering. Tablet 5, Nippur, 2250 BCE. Being returns to Enlil's temple, second visit, warns, 2,000 years remain, then I incarnate fully. Prepare humanity, or I will do it despite you. Tablet 6, Babylon, 2200 BCE. Being appears to a scribe, dictates specific instructions for recognizing the full incarnation when it comes. Lists characteristics that match Jesus exactly. Born in humble circumstances, performs healings, teaches love over law, demonstrates resurrection.
William felt dizzy. This wasn't one suppressed tablet. This was a systematic archive documenting Christ consciousness appearing repeatedly across 300 years, each time teaching the same message, building toward the promise of full incarnation. My grandfather, Arash continued, believed these tablets were deliberately separated and hidden by later priests who realized what they proved, that the being Christians worship as uniquely divine had been appearing for millennia before Jesus, that Jesus was the promised incarnation, but not the first appearance. Grandfather feared publishing them would cause religious wars, so he kept them hidden. When he died, they came to me, and I've been searching for someone who could understand them, translate them, and share them without destroying people's faith. Why me? William asked. Because your work on BM 121191 shows you understand the balance. You're not trying to destroy Christianity, you're expanding it, showing that Jesus was even more significant than the church teaches, because he was the culmination of thousands of years of divine consciousness interacting with humanity. The Anunnaki documented the buildup. Jesus was the fulfillment. William photographed each tablet carefully, his mind racing with implications. This proves the Anunnaki knew exactly who Jesus was before he was born. They'd been warned for centuries. They tracked the consciousness. They predicted the incarnation. Yes, Arash agreed. And here's what troubles me. If they predicted it, if they documented the warnings, then they also documented their response. Somewhere there are tablets describing what the Anunnaki decided to do when Jesus actually appeared. Did they accept him? Oppose him? Try to control his message? The crucifixion, was that purely human religious authority? Or did Anunnaki influence play a role? William felt cold, despite the warm cafe. He'd never considered that angle. The Gospels recorded the Pharisees and Romans killing Jesus. But what if the Anunnaki, threatened by his teaching that humans were divine equals, had manipulated events behind the scenes? "I don't know if those tablets exist," William said carefully. "But if they do, if someone finds documentation of Anunnaki involvement in the crucifixion, it would reframe everything," Arash finished. "Not just ancient history, but current theology. It would prove that Jesus' death wasn't God's plan for atonement, it was the Anunnaki's attempt to silence the truth that threatened their control. And the resurrection. Jesus demonstrated that consciousness transcends their ability to kill it. He proved exactly what he'd been warning them about for 2,000 years, that divine consciousness cannot be suppressed." William sat back, overwhelmed. 6 months ago, he'd found one tiny symbol on one suppressed tablet. Now he was seeing evidence of a systematic archive documenting thousands of years of contact between Christ consciousness and the Anunnaki. "What do you want me to do with this information?" William asked. Arash smiled sadly. "What you've been doing. Share it. Translate it. Let people who are ready find it. My grandfather hid these tablets out of fear, but fear only empowers the suppression. The truth needs to be free, not forced on anyone, but available for those seeking it." William nodded slowly. "I'll need time to translate all 7 tablets properly, verify dating, cross-reference with other sources, build an airtight academic case even though academia will reject it anyway." "Take the time you need," Arash said, standing. "But know this, you're not alone. I've been contacted by others. A professor in Beijing with Han Dynasty texts describing the luminous sage matching these descriptions. A researcher in Peru with Incan records of Viracocha teaching identical principles. A rabbi in Jerusalem with hidden Dead Sea Scroll fragments the Israeli government won't authenticate officially. The pattern is global. The Anunnaki weren't just in Mesopotamia. They were everywhere. And Christ consciousness was appearing everywhere, across cultures, always teaching the same truth. Humans are divine." As Arash left, William remained at the table staring at the photographs on his phone. 7 more tablets. 7 more pieces of the puzzle. And somewhere, possibly, tablets documenting the Anunnaki's role in Jesus' death and their reaction to his resurrection. The moment they realized they couldn't stop what they'd been warned about for millennia. William opened his laptop and began composing an email to his tablet translation collective. "Team, we need an emergency meeting. What I thought was one suppressed tablet is actually part of a vast archive. The Anunnaki didn't just meet Christ consciousness once, they tracked it for centuries, documented every appearance, and tried to predict the full incarnation. I now have evidence of 7 encounters spanning 300 years, all leading to Jesus, all proving he wasn't a random miracle, but the fulfillment of a divine promise that the Anunnaki had been warned about since 2500 BCE. This changes everything. Again." He hit send and closed the laptop. Through the cafe window, Istanbul stretched out, ancient city, layered with empires, religions, conquests. How many suppressed tablets were hidden in private collections here? How many truths buried in museum basements, labeled uncertain origin or religious mythology? William thought about the being that had appeared to him in the British Museum, the Grey and Nuntar. They'd said humanity was ready, that the awakening was accelerating, that suppressed information would surface when the time was right. Maybe this was how awakening happened, not through one dramatic revelation, but through 1,000 small discoveries, each researcher finding a piece, each translator publishing a fragment, each seeker recognizing truth when they encountered it. The network was forming. Not organized, not centralized, but real. Scholars on every continent finding evidence that human history was stranger, older, and more divine than any institution taught. And William was part of it now. Not the leader, just a translator, doing what he'd trained 30 years to do, but finally for a purpose that mattered. Translating not just ancient words, but ancient truth, for an audience finally ready to hear it.
William's discovery reveals something that both archaeology and Christianity have tried desperately to hide: that divine truth is bigger than any single religion teaches. The Sumerian tablet isn't mythology, it's documentation. The Anunnaki, real beings, not gods, encountered Christ consciousness 2,400 years before Jesus was born. They documented this encounter, and mainstream academia has suppressed it for 120 years because the implications are too revolutionary. What does this mean for you? It means Jesus wasn't lying when he said, "You are gods." He was stating literal truth. The same consciousness that appeared to the Anunnaki as pure light, that incarnated as Jesus to demonstrate human divine potential, that consciousness is within you, not as metaphor, as biology, as activated DNA, as Christ frequency resonating in every cell. The Anunnaki tried to keep humans dependent, worshiping external gods. Jesus broke that programming. He demonstrated that the kingdom of heaven isn't a place you go, it's a frequency you activate within you, right now, available to anyone willing to remember who they really are. This is why the tablet matters, because it proves Christianity isn't the whole story. It's a chapter in a much larger cosmic narrative, a narrative where divine consciousness incarnates repeatedly across history, always teaching the same core truth. You are source, experiencing itself. Dr. Wolf suppressed this evidence because 1904 Christianity couldn't handle it. But you can. Your generation is ready. Millions globally are experiencing spontaneous awakenings, direct contact with non-human intelligence, consciousness expansions that religion can't explain. You're remembering. The collective awakening the Anunnaki feared is happening now. If this story resonates with you, if you've always sensed that religious institutions weren't telling the complete truth, if you felt Christ consciousness in meditation or nature or moments of transcendent love, then you're experiencing exactly what that tablet describes. The being that appeared to the Anunnaki, the same one that incarnated as Jesus, it's not external, it's not distant, it's you, awakening to your own divine nature. Subscribe to Stories of Light and activate the bell, because William's discovery isn't isolated. Suppressed texts are surfacing globally. Independent researchers are sharing what mainstream academia hides. The truth is available for those with eyes to see. Leave a comment. Have you experienced Christ consciousness directly? Have you questioned why religions seem incomplete? What awakened in you while hearing this story? If you want to support this channel, become a member or leave a thanks badge. Each contribution helps us continue revealing suppressed truths about humanity's divine origin. Remember, the Anunnaki documented it. Jesus demonstrated it. The tablet proves it, and you embody it. The man of light isn't someone else. It's not external divinity you worship from a distance. It's the consciousness reading these words right now, recognizing itself, remembering what it's always been. You are the fulfillment of the prophecy. You are Christ consciousness awakening. You are source meeting source. Not someday, not after death, not through religious ritual. Right now, in this moment, as you are. The tablet waited 4,400 years for you to find it. Not Dr. Harrington. You. Because consciousness recognizes consciousness. And you are ready to remember. The question isn't whether you're divine. The question is, will you remember? The Anunnaki documented the warning. Jesus demonstrated the possibility. The awakening is happening now. Welcome home.